Every morning before sunrise, while most of the town still slept under thick blankets and streetlights cast long shadows on empty sidewalks, a man in faded jeans and scuffed work boots walked into the back entrance of Henderson's Hardware. He carried a worn broom, a mop bucket that clanked softly with each step, and a thermos of black coffee he'd brewed himself before dawn. To everyone on the store staff, he was just Harlan, the quiet overnight cleaner who showed up like clockwork, swept the aisles, wiped down shelves, and vanished before the first cashier punched in. No one gave him much thought. He wasn't loud. He didn't linger in break rooms or ask for favors. He just did his job, nodded politely if someone passed by, and kept to himself. The younger employees sometimes joked that Harlan must be part ghost. He moved so silently, you'd only notice he'd been there when the floors were spotless and the trash bins were empty. But Harlan wasn't just a cleaner. His real name was Arlen, and he'd co-founded Henderson's Hardware 23 years earlier, with his brother-in-law, back when it was just a single storefront with peeling paint and a dream. They'd built it from nothing, handing out flyers, staying late to reorganize shelves, remembering every customer's name and what kind of nails they used for their porch repairs. Over time, the business grew. More stores opened. Offices moved downtown. Arlen stepped into a corner office with a view of the river, signed checks instead of stacking boxes, and slowly, the day-to-day life of the stores became something he only read about in reports. Lately, though something felt off, employee turnover had spiked. Customer complaints were up, not about products but about how people were treated. Store number 42, the original location, had once been the pride of the chain. Now it was labeled underperforming in internal memos. Corporate blamed the economy. Middle managers blamed the staff. But Arlen couldn't shake the feeling that the problem ran deeper. So 3 weeks ago, he made a decision. He'd go back to where it all began. Not as the owner, not as the boss, but as someone invisible. Someone who could listen without being heard. He bought second-hand work clothes from a thrift store, traded his leather shoes for boots that squeaked just enough to sound real, and showed up at store number 42 asking for temporary cleaning work. The night supervisor, a tired woman named Rosa who'd been with the company since the early 2000s, barely glanced at his fake ID before handing him a key card. "Just don't touch the registers," she'd said, already turning back to her clipboard. And just like that, Harlan was in. For the first few nights, Arlen stuck to the routine, sweeping, mopping, emptying bins. He watched how the overnight stalkers moved, how they whispered to each other during breaks, how their shoulders tensed when certain names came up. He noticed things reports never showed. The way a young employee flinched when the store manager walked by. How the break room whiteboard, once full of birthday messages and shift swaps, was now blank except for a single stern note: "No personal items on counters." Then came Tuesday morning. It was 6:12 a.m. Arlen had just finished mopping the garden section, the scent of damp soil and fertilizer still hanging in the air. He pushed his cart toward the employee break room to refill his bucket from the utility sink inside. As he rounded the corner, voices stopped him cold. Inside the break room, someone was yelling, not shouting in anger exactly, but the kind of sharp, condescending tone that cuts deeper than volume ever could. Arlen froze, bucket in hand. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but something in the voice, the cold certainty, the lack of respect, made him pause just outside the slightly ajar door. "I don't care how long you've been here," the voice said. It was Derek, the store manager. Arlen recognized him instantly from photos in company newsletters. Tall, always in a pressed polo. The kind of guy who smiled for cameras but never with his eyes. "This isn't 2005 anymore. If you can't keep up with the new inventory system, maybe it's time to think about retirement." Arlen peeked through the crack in the door. Standing across from Derek was Lena. She'd worked at Henderson's since the store expanded its paint department in 2007. Arlen remembered hiring her himself. She'd brought in samples of color palettes she'd designed for local schools, all neatly organized in a binder. Over the years, she'd become the person customers asked for by name. "Is Lena in today? She knows exactly what shade matches my kitchen tiles." She was in her late 50s now, hair streaked with silver, wearing the same navy vest she'd worn for over a decade. Her hands were folded tightly in front of her, but her knuckles were white. "I didn't mess up the shipment log," she said, voice steady but low. The system glitched again. "I reported it twice last week. You said IT would look into it. And yet here we are, Derek snapped, tapping a clipboard against his palm. "Corporate's asking why store number 42 has discrepancies. And guess who's on the report, not me. Not IT, you." Lena didn't flinch. But Arlen saw the flicker in her eyes, the moment something inside her shifted. It wasn't fear. It was resignation. Like she'd been carrying a heavy box for years and finally her arms gave out. "You know what?" she said so quietly Arlen almost missed it. "I've given this place half my life. I trained half the people on this floor. I stayed late during storms to help board up windows for neighbors. I covered shifts when people had sick kids, and this is how I'm spoken to? Like I'm some kind of burden?" Derek scoffed. "Don't get dramatic. I'm just holding you accountable." "Accountable?" Lena let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't even know what that word means." She reached up, unclipped her name tag, and placed it gently on the table. Then she took off her vest, folded it neatly, and set it beside the tag. No grand gesture. No slamming doors. Just quiet, deliberate actions that spoke louder than any outburst. "I'm done," she said, and she walked out. Arlen stood frozen in the hallway, bucket forgotten at his feet. His chest felt tight. This wasn't just about a shipment log or a software glitch. This was about respect, about dignity, about the soul of the place he'd helped build, and how easily it had been chipped away by someone who saw people as problems to manage, not humans to support. He watched Lena pass by without seeing him, her steps firm but slow, like she was walking away from more than just a job. She didn't look back. Arlen waited until the front door clicked shut behind her. Then he stepped into the break room. Derek was still there, scrolling through his phone, muttering to himself about entitled old-timers. He didn't notice Arlen, just another invisible cleaner standing in the doorway, but Arlen noticed everything. The empty coffee cup with Lena's lipstick stain on the rim, the photo on the bulletin board, Lena smiling with a group of summer interns, all of them holding paintbrushes. The way Derek didn't even glance at the name tag she'd left behind. That morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the high windows, Arlen made a silent promise, not as a CEO, but as the man who'd once swept these same floors with his own hands. This wouldn't stand, and Lena wouldn't be forgotten. The store opened at 7, but by 6:30, the usual morning buzz had already started. Zippers on uniforms, chatter by the time clock, the hiss of the coffee machine in the break room. Yet something felt off, heavy like the air before a storm. Lena's absence hit harder than anyone expected. She wasn't just another employee. She was the one who remembered that Mr. Patel always bought galvanized screws for his fence repairs, or that the high school drama club needed hinges for their set every spring. She knew which paint matched the old brick on Main Street and which caulk wouldn't crack in winter. New hires called her the walking manual. Customers asked for her by name. Even the delivery drivers tipped their hats when she walked by. Now her station in the paint aisle stood empty. Her stool was tucked neatly under the counter. Her color-mixing notes, handwritten in a spiral notebook she'd kept for years, were gone. By mid-morning, whispers had turned into full conversations. "Did you hear?" She just walked out. "Derek really went at her yesterday. I heard it through the vent." "No way, Lena? She's been here forever." A young stalker named Tariq, who'd only been with the store for 6 months, stood near the garden tools, pretending to organize rakes while listening. He remembered his first week, nervous, fumbling with the register, and how Lena had stayed late to show him how to reset the receipt printer without calling tech support. "They don't teach you this stuff in training," she'd said with a wink. "You learn it from people who care." Now he watched Derek stride through the store like nothing had happened, clipboard in hand, barking orders about shelf alignment. Tariq felt a knot in his stomach. If they could treat Lena like that after all she'd done, what chance did he have? Meanwhile, Arlen, still in his Harlan disguise, kept sweeping. But his eyes were everywhere. He saw how employees avoided the break room, how they spoke in hushed tones near the loading dock, how no one made eye contact with Derek unless forced to. The store wasn't just missing a person, it was missing its heart. That afternoon, during his lunch break, Arlen slipped out the back door and walked 10 blocks to a quiet neighborhood of modest brick homes and overgrown flower beds. He'd looked up Lena's address quietly. Just a public record search, nothing invasive. He didn't plan to confront her. He just needed to understand. He found her apartment above a laundromat, laundry lines crisscrossing the alley below. The curtains were drawn, but a single lamp glowed in the window. He hesitated, then knocked softly. After a long pause, the door opened a few inches, chain still on. Yes? Lena's voice was tired but sharp. It's Harlan, Arlen said gently. From the store. The cleaner. She studied him through the crack. Then slowly, she unhooked the chain and opened the door. She looked older than she had that morning. Shoulders slumped, hair loose from its usual bun. But her eyes were clear. What are you doing here? I just wanted to make sure you were okay, he said. What happened wasn't right. Lena let out a breath, then stepped aside. Come in, but I don't have much. The apartment was small but tidy. Boxes were stacked in the living room, half filled with books, framed photos, and gardening gloves. A kettle whistled on the stove. You're moving? Arlen asked. Not moving, she said, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. Just clearing space mentally. She handed him a mug. I took a job. At the community garden center downtown. Starts Monday. Arlen blinked. Already? She gave a small smile. Turns out when you stop waiting for permission to be valued, opportunities show up fast. They called me after I posted online that I was looking. Said they'd heard good thing. From who? Customers, she said simply. One of them owns the place. Said I helped her pick the right sealant for her greenhouse last year. Remembered how I stayed late to test samples under different lights. Arlen sipped his tea, warmth spreading through his chest. This was the kind of loyalty no spreadsheet could measure. They offered me a role helping design their tool shed and workshop, Lena went on. Said they wanted someone who understands both the tools and the people who use them. She looked out the window. Funny, isn't it? After all those years of being told I was outdated, someone actually asked for my opinion. Arlen set his mug down. You didn't deserve what happened. No, she said, turning to face him. I didn't. But I also realized something. I've spent so long trying to prove I still belong that I forgot to ask if the place still deserved me. The words hung in the air. Simple and true. They talked for nearly an hour. About the old days at the store, about how things had slowly changed. About how respect used to be part of the uniform. Not something you had to beg for. Lena didn't sound bitter. Just tired and ready for something better. Before he left, Arlen asked, would you be open to talking again? Maybe helping fix what's broken? She studied him for a long moment. Are you just the cleaner, Harlan? He met her gaze. Let's just say I care more than most. She nodded slowly. Then yes. I'd talk. Back at the store that night, Arlen didn't sweep. He sat in the dimly lit office after hours. Derek had left early as usual and pulled out a small notebook. He wrote down everything. The way Lena's hands shook not from fear but from exhaustion. The silence that followed her departure. The way Tariq looked at the floor when Derek passed by. This wasn't just about one bad manager. It was about a culture that had forgotten its roots. The next morning, Arlen returned as Harlan, but something had shifted inside him. He watched Derek more closely now. Not just his words, but his actions. How he took credit for a display idea a junior employee had pitched. How he blamed a cashier for a register shortage that was clearly a system error. How he never once asked how someone's day was going. Only whether their tasks were done. By Friday, the staff was moving like ghosts. Smiles were rare. Breaks were taken alone. Even the usual banter by the coffee machine had vanished. Then during a team huddle, Derek announced, corporate's sending someone next week to review performance. So clean up your act, especially in inventory. No more excuses. A few employees exchanged glances. No one spoke up, but Arlen noticed Tariq clench his jaw. And the paint department clerk, a woman named Marisol, quietly slipped Lena's old color chart back onto the counter when Derek wasn't looking, as if to say, she's still here in spirit. That night, Arlen called his assistant from a payphone 2 blocks away. Cancel my meetings for next week, he said. I'm staying in store 42. He didn't say why. He didn't need to, because by then he knew exactly what he had to do. And it wouldn't involve brooms or buckets, it would involve truth. And maybe, just maybe, a second chance, not just for Lena, but for everyone who still believed that work should feel human. The weekend passed in silence. No one talked about Lena, not out loud anyway. But her absence echoed in every corner of the store. The paint aisle felt colder, the break room quieter. Even the old radio behind the garden counter, which used to play soft classic rock during slow afternoons, stayed off. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a steady drizzle. Arlen showed up early as usual, broom in hand, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd spent the weekend thinking, not just about what happened to Lena, but about everything he'd seen since slipping into the role of Harlan. The way people held their breath when Derek walked by. The way good ideas got ignored unless they came from the top. The way loyalty was treated like a weakness instead of a strength. He knew now that this wasn't just about one person being mistreated. It was about a whole system that had lost its way. That afternoon during his break, Arlen walked to the community garden center downtown. It was a modest place. Wooden beams, glass panels fogged with rain, rows of seedlings under grow lights. And there, kneeling beside a tray of tomato plants, was Lena. She wore a green apron, dirt on her knees, hair tied back with a bandana. She looked lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She spotted him and stood, brushing soil from her hands. "Harlan, didn't expect to see you here." "I wanted to see it for myself," he said, glancing around. "This place suits you," she smiled. "It feels honest. People come in not just to buy things, but to learn, to grow something real. No spreadsheets, no blame games." They walked through the greenhouse together, past shelves of compost bins, rain barrels, and hand tools with wooden handles worn smooth by use. Lena pointed out a new display she'd helped set up, a beginner's garden kit with everything a first-time grower would need. "I suggested grouping them by season," she said. "Makes it less overwhelming," Arlen nodded. "You always thought about the person on the other side. That's the job, isn't it?" she said simply. "Not just moving product, but helping people succeed." They sat on a bench near the back, sheltered from the rain. For a while, neither spoke. Then Arlen said, "I'm not just the cleaner." Lena looked at him, really looked. "I figured. No offense, but you don't move like someone who spent their life pushing a mop." He took a breath. "My name is Arlen. I co-founded Henderson's." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't gasp or jump up. She just studied him, calm and steady. "So, you've been watching." "Listening," he corrected, trying to understand what went wrong. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "It didn't go wrong overnight. It crept in. Little things. A manager who stopped saying thank you. Policies that punished honesty. Rewards that went to the loudest, not the fairest. After a while, people stopped speaking up. They just disappeared inside themselves." Arlen felt a pang of guilt. He'd signed off on those policies. He'd trusted the chain would run itself. He'd been too far removed to see the slow erosion. "I should have been paying attention," he said. "Maybe," she replied gently. "But you're here now. That counts for something." Before he left, she handed him a small packet of seeds. "Basil," she said. "Grows fast. Needs sun, but not too much. Kind of like people." He tucked the seeds into his pocket like a promise. Back at the store, Arlen didn't sweep that night. Instead, he stayed late, walking the aisles alone. He stopped at the paint counter, ran his fingers over the edge where Lena used to rest her coffee mug. He checked the inventory logs, saw the same errors she'd reported still unresolved. He reviewed shift schedules and noticed how the same few employees always got stuck with the worst hours, while others, Derek's favorites, got weekends off. The next morning, he watched Derek in action again. This time, he saw something new. During a staff meeting, a new hire, a quiet woman named Priya, tentatively suggested reorganizing the plumbing aisle by project type instead of by brand. "Customers get confused," she said. "They don't care if it's brand A or B, they just want to fix their sink." Derek barely looked up from his phone. "We've done it this way for years. Don't overcomplicate things." Priya nodded quickly and sat down, face flushed. But Arlen saw the spark in her eyes dim just a little. Later, in the break room, Arlen overheard two stalkers talking. "Remember when Lena used to say, 'If it helps the customer, try it'?" "Yeah, now it's 'if it's not in the manual, don't even think about it.'" Arlen's jaw tightened. That evening, he called his head of HR from a diner booth, using a burner phone he'd bought just for this. "I need you to pull every personnel file for store number 42, he said. "Especially complaints, turnover reasons, and performance reviews from the last 3 years. And get legal to review recording consent laws in this state. I may have audio." There was a pause on the line. "Arlen, are you okay?" "I'm finally seeing clearly," he said. "And I'm not leaving until it's fixed." The next few days blurred together. Arlen kept up his Harlan routine by day. But by night, he pored over documents in a cheap motel room. The pattern was undeniable. High performers, especially long-tenured ones, were consistently rated lower if they questioned decisions. Customer satisfaction scores dropped sharply after Derek took over. And in nearly every exit interview, the same words appeared: disrespected, unheard, burned out. On Thursday, he returned to the garden center. This time he didn't come alone. He brought Rosa, the night supervisor who'd hired Harlan weeks ago. She'd been with the company since the beginning, but lately, she'd grown quiet, tired. Lena greeted them both with mugs of herbal tea. No questions, just warmth. Rosa looked around, eyes softening. This place feels like how Henderson's used to feel. Because it's built on trust, Lena said. Harlan turned to Rosa. I need your help. Not as a supervisor, as someone who remembers what this company stood for. Rosa hesitated, then nodded. I've stayed quiet too long. Together, they began gathering stories, not just from former employees, but from customers who'd stopped coming, from delivery drivers who'd seen the change firsthand. No accusations, just truth told gently. By Friday, Harlan had everything he needed, not just proof of Derek's behavior, but proof of what had been lost and what could still be saved. That night, as rain tapped against the motel window, he sat at the small desk and wrote a single sentence at the top of a blank page. People aren't problems to manage. They're the reason we exist. He didn't know yet how he'd fix it all, but he knew one thing for sure. Monday morning, he wouldn't be Harlan anymore. He'd be the man who built this place, and he'd finally come home. Monday morning arrived with crisp autumn air and a sky so clear it felt like the world had been rinsed clean. At store number 42, employees shuffled in as usual, zipping up vests, checking schedules, avoiding eye contact. The mood was heavy like it had been for weeks. Another corporate review was rumored to be coming. No one knew what it meant, but they all braced for the worst. What they didn't expect was the black sedan that pulled into the employee parking lot just after 7. Out stepped Harlan, not in work boots or a faded jacket, but in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, no tie, no flashy watch. Behind him walked 2 people the staff recognized instantly, the regional HR director and the head of operations. Both looked serious but not angry, just present. Whispers started before they even reached the door. Is that? No way. He looks just like the guy in the old photos by the break room. Harlan didn't head to the office. He walked straight to the center of the store near the paint aisle, the heart of the place where Lena used to stand. He waited quietly as employees gathered, drawn by curiosity and something deeper, hope maybe, though no one dared name it yet. Then Derek arrived, coffee in hand, already barking into his headset about a delayed delivery. He froze when he saw the group. His face went pale. Harlan? He stammered, voice cracking slightly. I didn't know you were visiting. I know, Harlan said calmly. That was the point. He didn't raise his voice, didn't gesture dramatically. He simply turned to the small crowd that had formed, cashiers, stockers, garden clerks, even the part-timer who swept the parking lot, and said, I've been here for the past 3 weeks, not as the owner. As one of you, a murmur rippled through the group, eyes widened. Someone gasped. I swept these floors. I listened, and what I heard broke my heart. He paused, letting that sink in. Then he looked at Derek. Come with me. They walked to the manager's office. Harlan closed the door, but not all the way, just enough that the room felt private, not secretive. He sat across from Derek, hands resting on the desk. The HR director stood near the door, tablet in hand. The operations lead leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. I'm not here to ambush you, Harlan said. I'm here because I owe you the same honesty you never gave others. He pulled a small recorder from his pocket, the kind that looked like an old voice memo device. Do you remember what you said to Lena last Tuesday morning? Derek shifted in his chair. I was just holding her accountable. The inventory logs were wrong. The logs weren't wrong, Harlan interrupted gently. The system was, and she'd reported it twice. You ignored her. He pressed play. Lena's voice filled the room, quiet but firm. I've given this place half my life, and this is how I'm spoken to? Then Derek's reply, sharp and dismissive. Don't get dramatic. I'm just holding you accountable. Derek's face flushed. That's taken out of context. It's not, Arlen said. And it's not the only time. He didn't list every incident. Didn't need to. He simply said, you built a culture of fear, not respect. You made good people feel small. And that's not leadership. That's control. Derek opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. For the first time, he looked small himself. Within the hour, he was escorted out. Not with handcuffs or shouting, but with a quiet dignity that made the moment even more powerful. He packed his desk under supervision, handed over his keycard, and left without a word to anyone. Then Arlen did something unexpected. He walked back onto the sales floor and called everyone together, not in the break room, but right there among the shelves, where real work happened. I'm sorry, he said, looking at each person in turn. I built this place to be different, to value people, not just productivity. Somewhere along the way, I stepped back too far. I trusted the machine more than the humans running it. He told them about Lena, not as a victim, but as a reminder of what they'd lost and what they could still reclaim. And I'm not just apologizing, he added. I'm changing things. Starting today, he announced 3 immediate actions. First, an anonymous feedback system, accessible from any phone, reviewed weekly by him personally. Second, mandatory leadership training focused on empathy, not just efficiency. Third, a new legacy associate program to honor long-serving team members, not with plaques, but with real influence, a seat at planning meetings, input on store changes, and a mentorship role for new hires. And the first legacy associate, he said, voice thick with emotion, is Lena Cho. A cheer went up, soft at first, then louder until the whole store was clapping. Not for him, for her, for the idea that loyalty still mattered. Later that day, Arlen met with Rosa and a few trusted staff members to brainstorm how to rebuild trust. No corporate jargon, no top-down orders, just honest conversation. What do you need to feel respected here? He asked. Be heard, said Tariq. Fair schedules, said Marisol. Mistakes treated as lessons, not failures, added Priya. Arlen wrote it all down in a notebook, not a spreadsheet. By closing time, the store felt different. Not perfect, but lighter. Like windows had been opened after years of stale air. That evening, Arlen drove to Lena's apartment. He didn't bring flowers or apologies. He brought a simple offer. Come back, not as an employee, but as a partner in rebuilding this place. Help us design a store that feels like home again. She didn't say yes right away, but she didn't say no. Instead, she handed him a small potted basil plant, its leaves bright green, already thriving. You said you'd never gardened before, she said with a smile. Start with this. Water it every other day. Talk to it if you want. Plants like company. He took it carefully, like it was made of glass. As he drove back, the basil on the passenger seat, Arlen realized something. Fixing a broken workplace wasn't about firing one bad manager. It was about planting new seeds and tending to them with patience, care, and time. And for the first time in years, he believed they might actually grow. 2 months had passed since that Monday morning when everything changed. The air in store number 42 felt different now, not just cleaner but softer, like the sharp edges had been worn down by time and care. Music played again in the afternoons, nothing loud, just gentle guitar or old soul songs that made the paint aisles feel less like a workplace and more like a place where people belonged. The break room whiteboard was full again. Not with rules, but with notes. Happy birthday, Priya. Thanks, Tariq, for covering my shift. New coffee brand, try it. Someone had even taped up a photo of the team planting flowers out front. All of them smiling, sleeves rolled up, dirt on their hands. And on a Saturday morning in late October, Lena walked through the front doors, not as a former employee, not as a ghost of what once was, but as someone with a purpose. She wore jeans, a flannel shirt, and the same green apron she'd worn at the garden center, though today it was clean. In her arms, she carried rolled-up blueprints and a tote bag full of fabric swatches, paint chips, and a thermos of homemade chai. Arlen met her near the garden section, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. He looked tired but calm, the kind of tired that comes from doing work that matters. You came, he said, handing her a cup. I said I would, she replied, taking it with a small smile. Besides, someone's got to make sure you don't turn the lounge into a corporate showroom. They walked toward the back of the store, past shelves now organized with input from the staff. Plumbing tools grouped by project. Paint labeled with real-life examples. This one's for porch ceilings, won't mildew. Even a little Ask Me badge system so customers knew who to talk to about what. The old employee lounge had been empty for weeks, cleared out after Derek left. Now it was ready for a new beginning. Lena unrolled the blueprints on a folding table. They weren't fancy, just hand-drawn sketches with notes in the margins. Comfy chairs, not plastic. Big table for shared meals. Window for natural light. Space for kids if parents get called in last minute. This isn't just a break room, she said. It's where people recharge. Where they remember they're human. Arlen nodded. You always saw the heart of things. They spent the morning measuring walls, debating cushion colors, testing light fixtures. No executives. No consultants. Just two people who believed that dignity starts with small choices. Like whether a tired worker gets to sit on a chair that doesn't hurt their back. Around noon, Rosa brought them sandwiches from the deli next door. The team's buzzing, she said, leaning against the doorframe. They keep peeking in, asking when they can help paint. Tell them Monday, Lena said. We'll do it together. As Rosa walked away, a young voice called out from the hallway. Excuse me. Ms. Cho? They turned. It was a new hire, barely out of high school, name tag still shiny, eyes wide with nerves. She clutched a clipboard like it might fly away. Lena set down her tape measure. Yes, I was told to ask you about the display for winterizing gardens. I've never done it before, and the manual's kind of confusing. Lena didn't sigh. Didn't glance at Arlen like, here we go again. She just smiled. Come on in. Let's figure it out. She pulled out a stool, gestured for the girl to sit, and opened her notebook. The same one she'd used for years, now filled with fresh notes from the garden center. First, forget the manual. What do real people need when frost hits? The girl blinked. I guess protection for plants? And maybe tools that won't freeze? Exactly, Lena said. Now let's walk the aisles and pick what actually works, not what looks good on paper. As they headed out, Arlen watched them go, Lena talking gently, the new hire's shoulders slowly relaxing. No titles, no hierarchy. Just one person helping another. He stayed behind for a moment, looking around the empty lounge. On the windowsill sat the basil plant he'd been tending since that day in the motel. It had grown tall, leaves lush and fragrant. He'd talk to it sometimes, like Lena suggested, not because he believed it listened, but because it reminded him to slow down, to care for things quietly, without expecting applause. Later that afternoon, as sunlight slanted through the high windows, the staff gathered for an informal meeting, not in the office, but right there in the middle of the store, near the paint counter that now bore a small brass plaque. In honor of those who mix more than colors, they mix kindness, patience, and care. Arlen didn't give a speech. He just said, this place is yours, not mine. Not corporate's, yours, and if something doesn't feel right, say it. Not because I'm asking you to, but because you deserve to be heard. Then Lena stepped forward. And if you ever doubt your worth here, she added, come find me. Or Tariq, or Rosa, or anyone wearing the Ask Me badge. We've all been where you are. No one clapped right away. But then Tariq started. And soon the whole store was smiling, nodding. Some even wiping their eyes. Afterward, as people drifted back to work, Arlen and Lena stood by the front door watching customers come and go. A man asked for help finding weather stripping. Priya walked over without being called, listened carefully, and led him to the right aisle. The man thanked her by name. That used to be us, Lena said softly. It still is, Arlen replied. Just better. They didn't talk about the past much. No blame, no bitterness. Just quiet pride in what they were building now. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the parking lot, a little girl ran up to Lena, holding a dented watering can. My mom said you're the plant lady. Can you help me fix this? Lena knelt down. Of course. Let's see what we've got. Arlen watched them, Lena showing the girl how to patch the hole with sealant, the girl's face lighting up with each step. It wasn't about hardware anymore. It was about connection, about passing something real from one person to the next. He took a deep breath. The air smelled like pine, fresh paint, and possibility. And for the first time in a long time, the word we didn't just sound good. It felt true.